Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Orlah. We are up to Perik Bet Mishnah Aleph. Today's Mishnah should be Leilun Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana Aranbayev, and Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov, Menuchatam Began Eden, Amen. The second chapter discusses the rule of Bitul Berov, nullification by the majority, as they apply to Orlah, Kilei Kerem, and holy foods like Tirumah and the meat of offerings. Prohibited items that became mixed with permitted items become batel, nullified in a simple majority. So for example, if one prohibited item falls into two permitted items and we cannot tell which one is the prohibited one, all three may be used because the prohibited item has become nullified, meaning it lost its prohibited status through its mixture with the larger number of permitted items. The situation is more complicated when it comes to food mixtures, because the prohibited food adds its forbidden flavor to the mixture as a whole. Now, the flavor of prohibited food is also prohibited, as the Gemara tells us in Masechet Chulin, page 108a. This is known as tam ki ikar. The flavor is like the main part of the food, as the Gemara tells us in Masechet Pesachim, page 44b. Therefore, food mixtures require more than a simple majority to nullify the prohibited food in them. There must be so much more permitted food that someone eating the mixture would not taste the flavor of the prohibited food, which is what we call, right, binotentam. When this cannot be determined, we generally require 60 times more permitted food than prohibited food to permit the mixture, since most flavors cannot be detected in these proportions. Now, when the prohibited and permitted foods are both the same kind, ming bimino, for example, kosher slaughtered meat with non-kosher meat of the same kind, the taste of the prohibited food can never be detected. Nevertheless, 60 times more permitted food is needed to nullify the forbidden food midrabanan by rabbinic decree. When the two foods are not of the same kind, mean b'she'eno mino, for example, bacon mixed with kosher meat, and there is someone who can taste it and determine whether the flavor of the non-kosher food is detectable in the mixture. For example, there's a non-Jewish chef who can taste it and tell us, then the mixture can be permitted even with less than 60 if he tells us that there is no taste of the non-kosher food in the mixture, as the Gemara tells us in Masechet Chulin, page 97b. However, the Rama brings down in Siman 98 Halacha 1, it is the practice of Ashkenazic Jews not to rely on the opinion of a non-Jewish taster. Now, this is the rule for foods that were blended together or cooked together, lach belach, literally wet and wet. The rule for pieces that simply got mixed together but didn't give any flavor to each other, that's what we call yavesh biyavesh, literally dry and dry. That's somewhat different. These still need a proportion of 60-1 when they are of different kinds. But if they are the same kind, they only require a simple majority. And Maran speaks about this more in Shulchan Aruch Chedek Yorodea, Siman 109, Halacha 1. Now, the first Mishnah teaches that there are certain kinds of holy foods and prohibited foods that are subject to a higher standard and do not become nullified in a simple majority or even in a mixture of 1 to 60. Hatirumah, utumat maaser shel demai, hachala v'abikurim, tirumat maaser of demai, chala and bikurim, which we know tirumah is the portion of a crop grown in Eretz Yisrael that's given to a Kohen. Tirumat maaser is the portion separated by Levi from the maaser rishon he receives from the crop. That too is given to a Kohen. Chala is the portion a person must give to a Kohen from dough that he makes. Bikurim are the first fruits of the 7 species for which Eretz Yisrael was famous. These fruits are brought to the Bet HaMikdash and eventually given to a Kohen. Now, all of these are referred to in the Torah as Tirumah in Sefer Bamidbar, chapter 18, pasuk 26, chapter 15, pasuk 19, and in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 12, pasuk 17, and they may all be eaten only by a Kohen and his family. Tirumat maaser of demai, which we didn't explain yet, is the portion separated from maaser of demai and given to a Kohen. Again, demai is produce bought from an amaretz, an unlearned person. When the rabbis saw that not all amaretz separated maaser, they decreed that any produce bought from an amaretz must be tithed, even if he claims that he already did so. The strict law of nullification the Mishnah is about to teach for tirumat maaser certainly applies to regular tirumat maaser as well. The Mishnah is choosing a case of tirumat maaser of demai to show that it applies even to tirumat maaser of demai, which is required only by rabbinic law midrabanan. So again, התרומה ותרומת מעשר של דמאי, החלה והביקורים, תרומת מעשר of דמאי, חלה and ביקורים, עולים באחד ומאה. They all become nullified in a mixture of 101 parts, meaning a mixture containing one part of these holy foods together with 100 parts of chulin, ordinary food. It takes 100 parts of chulin to nullify one part of tirumah or any of these other holy foods. Once they become nullified, the mixture may be eaten by anyone, even someone who was not a Kohen. However, the Mifalshim say if there is less than 100 times as much chulin, only a Kohen may eat from the mixture, since these foods are forbidden to non-Kohanim. Again, this is only a rabbinic decree, midrabanan, due to the special holiness of these foods. Midoraita, by biblical law, tirumah and other holy foods become nullified in the same proportion as any other prohibited food. Mitztarfin zeim zeh, the Mishnah says, they combine with one another to prohibit a mixture into which they fall, meaning if two or more of these types of holy foods fall into permitted food, they combine to prohibit the mixture to non-Kohanim unless there is 100 times as much permitted food as all the holy foods combined. So for example, if one part tirumah and one part chala fall into 100 parts of chulin, the mixture is prohibited to a non-Kohen unless there are 200 parts of chulin to nullify them. Now, these foods combine, even according to those that say, which we're going to see later on, that different prohibitions do not ordinarily combine to prohibit a mixture, but since these are all called tirumah by the Torah, we treat them all as one large measure of tirumah. And the Mishnah continues, v'tzarich la'arim, but even in a case where they become nullified, he must remove from the mixture the amount of holy food that fell in and became nullified and give it to a Kohen. Since tirumat maaser, chala and bikurim belong to the Kohen, to the tribe of Kohanim, keeping the part that became nullified would be like stealing from the Kohanim. So for example, if a se'ah measure of tirumat maaser, chala and bikurim fell into 100 se'ah of chulin, they become nullified and the mixture can be eaten by anyone. But a se'ah of the mixture must still be separated and given to a Kohen. Now, although the holiness of the tirumah became nullified, the property rights of the Kohanim did not. The Mishnah now discusses the nullification, the bitul of prohibited produce, specifically Orlah and Kilei HaKerem. Ha-Orlah v'Chilei HaKerem. Orlah and Kilei HaKerem, climb of the vineyard. We know the Torah prohibits planting grains or vegetables together with grapevines. If they are planted together, both the grapes and the grains or vegetables become prohibited as Kilei HaKerem, climb of the vineyard. They may not be eaten, nor may one have any benefit from them, like we saw in Mishnah Kelayim, chapter 8, Mishnah 1. It's similarly forbidden to eat or have any benefit from Orlah, like we learned earlier. So the Mishnah says, Orlah and Kilei HaKerem olim be'echad u'matayim. They become nullified in a mixture of 201, in a mixture containing one part of these prohibited foods and 200 parts of ordinary food. It takes 200 parts of permissible food to nullify one part of Orlah or Kilei HaKerem and permit the mixture to be eaten. This too is only a rabbinic decree d'Rabbanan. The reason the rabbis were stricter with Orlah and Kilei HaKerem and required a margin of 200 to 1 to nullify them is that their prohibitions are twice as strict as the prohibition of tirumah. Meaning what? While a non-Kohen is forbidden to eat tirumah, he may nevertheless have benefit from it. For example, if he inherited tirumah from his mother's father who was a Kohen, he may sell it to a Kohen. But in the case of Orlah and Kilei HaKerem, however, we are forbidden to have any benefit from them. So since the Isul, the prohibition, is twice as strict, the rabbis set their margin of nullification as twice as much, 200 to 1 instead of 100 to 1. And they combine with each other to prohibit the mixture into which they fall. If both Orlah and Kilei HaKerem fall into permitted food, the mixture may not be eaten unless there is 200 times as much permitted food as the two of them together. Now, according to this Tanakama, Orlah and Kilei HaKerem combine to prohibit a mixture, even though there are different prohibitions. This is true of all types of mixtures, same kind, different kind, dry, wet, except in the case where they were cooked together with permitted food of a different kind. We're going to explain that later on at the end of the Mishnah. The Mifalshim explain also the Mishnah is speaking of the case where the Orlah and Kilei HaKerem fell into the permitted food together. If one fell first and then the other, the law would be different, like we're going to see later on. The Mishnah says, in a case where they do become nullified, he does not have to remove anything from the mixture since no one has any monetary claim to them, right? Since there is no requirement to give Orlah and Kilei HaKerem to anyone, there is no question of stealing as there was in the case of Tirumah. Rabbi Shimon says he disagrees. Enan mitzarfin, Orlah and Kilei HaKerem do not combine because they are different prohibitions with different names. According to Rabbi Shimon, only prohibitions that at least share a common name can combine with each other. Now, nowhere do we find the Torah referring to them as part of a single category of prohibition. Therefore, since they are different prohibitions, different isurim, according to Rabbi Shimon, they do not combine to prohibit a mixture. However, tirumat maaser, chala, and bikurim are all called tirumah by the Torah, and therefore even Rabbi Shimon agrees in the first case of the Mishnah that they do combine to prohibit a mixture tanan kohanim. Now, since Orlah and Kilei HaKerem do not combine according to Rabbi Shimon, if there is 200 times more permissible food than the Orlah is nullified, and if there is 200 times more permissible food than the Kilei HaKerem, that too is nullified. As long as the permissible food is 200 times more than each of them individually, they are nullified. It doesn't have to be 200 times more than the Orlah and Kilei HaKerem together. Now, according to the first Tana, Orlah and Kilei HaKerem combine with each other to prohibit a mixture. According to Rabbi Shimon, they do not combine to prohibit a mixture. The Mishnah now is going to quote a third opinion. According to this next Tana, Orlah and Kilei HaKerem sometimes combine to prohibit, and sometimes they do not. It all depends on what type of mixture they fall into. Rabbi Eliezer says, Mitztarfin benot tam, Orlah and Kilei HaKerem combine to prohibit a mixture when it comes to giving flavor, meaning when they fall into the type of a mixture in which their flavors can spread through the entire mixture and be tasted. This occurs in a lach, in a wet mixture. For example, where wine made from Orlah grapes and Kilei HaKerem grapes falls into water, or where Orlah fruit and Kilei HaKerem fall into a pot of food that's being cooked. In such a mixture, if the flavor of the two of them together can be tasted, the mixture is prohibited. And the Mefarshim explain, mixtures in which liquids or foods are blended together are known as lach bilach, literally wet in wet mixtures. Food that are cooked together are also considered wet, even if they are solid foods, because the liquid in which they are cooked causes their flavors to spread throughout the pot. Like as we will see in the end of Mishnah Zayin, mixtures of this kind are an exception to the 100 to 1 law for Tirumah, or the 200 to 1 law of Orlah and Kilei HaKerem. The only issue in such mixtures is whether the flavor of the prohibited food can be tasted in the mixture. And again, like we said, in such a mixture, if the flavor of the two of them together can be tasted, the mixture is prohibited. According to Rabbi Eliezer, if Orlah and Kilei HaKerem both fall into a mixture of this kind, the mixture is not prohibited as long as we can still taste the combined flavor of the two. Now, although neither the Orlah wine nor the Kilei HaKerem wine could flavor the mixture by itself, since the flavor of the two of them together can be tasted, they combine to prohibit the mixture. Now, obviously, Mefarshim explained, Rabbi Eliezer is speaking of a case where the Orlah and Kilei HaKerem fell into a different kind of food, min b'sheno mino. For example, wine into water, or grapes cooked with vegetables or meat. Because if the Orlah and Kilei HaKerem wine mixed with permissible wine, or their grapes were cooked with permissible grapes, min b'mino, there's no possibility of tasting their flavor since all the flavors are the same. So in that case, that would be subject to the next rule of the Mishnah. And Rabbi Eliezer holds like Rabbi Shimon that different prohibitions do not combine to prohibit. He makes an exception only where the two combine to give a noticeable flavor to the permitted food. Rabbi Shimon, however, holds even in this case the two do not combine. Although we can taste the flavor of the wine in the mixture, since it's not the flavor of Orlah by itself or the flavor of Kilei HaKerem by itself, the mixture is permitted. The Mishnah says, Avalo le'esor, right? We said, Mitzarfin benot tam. They combine to prohibit a mixture when it comes to giving flavor, but they do not combine to prohibit a mixture in regards to needing 200 to 1 to nullify them, meaning when they fall into the kind of mixture in which their flavor does not spread through the mixture, a dry mixture, Orlah and Kilei HaKerem do not combine to need 200 times more permissible food to nullify both of them together. As long as there is enough to nullify each of them separately by a margin of 200 to 1, they both become nullified. It's not necessary to have 200 times more than both of them together. Now, in cases where Orlah and Kilei HaKerem get mixed up with permissible food in a dry mixture, yavesh biyavesh, in which each piece remains separate from the others, they're not cooked together, the prohibited food does not give any flavor to the permitted food. So in mixtures of this type, the rule is that Orlah and Kilei HaKerem do not become nullified unless there is 200 times more permissible food. In regards to this rule, Orlah and Kilei HaKerem do not combine, meaning as long as there is 200 times more permissible food than each of them separately, the mixture may be eaten even though we don't have 200 times more than both of them together. An example of this case is where a container of food made from Orlah and a container of food made from Kilei HaKerem got mixed up with 200 containers of food made from permissible food. That would be a case of yavesh biyavesh. And the Rav writes, V'alacha kitanakama, the halacha follows the opinion of the Tanakama. And that is an abotai of Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Bet now teaches how one forbidden food can sometimes help nullify a different forbidden food. Hatiruma ma'ala et ha'orlah va'orlah et tiruma. Tiruma can help nullify orlah, and orlah can help nullify tiruma. Meaning, tiruma can join with chulin to create the 200-to-1 majority necessary to nullify orlah, and orlah can join with the chulin to create the 101 majority necessary to nullify tiruma. Ketzad, how so? Se'at tiruma shenafla lemea. If a se'ah of tiruma fell into close to 100 se'ah of chulin, meaning it fell into 99.5 se'ah of chulin, which is not enough to nullify tiruma, because we know tiruma only becomes nullified in 100 times more chulin, like we learned. Therefore, the se'ah of tiruma that fell in does not become nullified. And afterwards, 3 kavs, half a se'ah of orlah, fell into the chulin as well. There are 6 kavs in a se'ah, therefore 3 kavs are half a se'ah. Since there are only 99.5 se'ahs of chulin, there is not enough chulin to nullify the half se'ah of orlah, which needs a margin of 200-to-1. Or 3 kavs, half a se'ah of kidei kerem fell in. This is the case in which the tiruma nullifies the orlah or kidei kerem, and the orlah nullifies the tiruma. And the Mefarshim explain, just a lot of math here, the mixture now contains 99.5 se'ahs of chulin, 1 se'ah of tiruma, and half a se'ah of orlah or kidei kerem. The se'ah of tiruma combines with the 99.5 se'ah of chulin to form a unit of 100.5 se'ahs, which is enough to nullify the half se'ah of orlah by a margin of 200-to-1, because 100.5 se'ah equal 201 half se'ahs, which is more than enough to nullify the half se'ah of orlah. And the half se'ah of orlah combines with the 99.5 se'ahs of chulin to form a unit of 100 se'ahs, which is enough to nullify the tiruma by a margin of 100-to-1. Now the Mishnah is speaking about a case where the tiruma fell in first and then the orlah. That's why they can take care of each other. If they fell in together, they would not combine with the chulin to help nullify each other. On the contrary, if they fell in together, they would combine with each other to form a larger block of forbidden food, which would require enough chulin to nullify both of them together, like we looked in chapter 1. But again, just to go over, you have to just understand the math in this Mishnah. That is an abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Everybody should have a Chag Sameach. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.